Hello and welcome to the Man Like Radio podcast. Now let's do some godly talk for godly walk.
Well, hello and welcome to the Man Like Radio podcast. I am your host, Richard Boyd. Of course, I have on the line with me from Three Rivers, Texas, Pastor Auther Culpepper. Auther, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, very well.
I figure you would be. But anyway, I just want to get out to the folks and let them know you're listening to or joining into or watching, whichever way it's easy for you, if you're doing it live or you're doing it later, to the Man Like Radio podcast. And tonight we have a great show. Want to give you some things before we get into the topic. It's going to be very interesting. First of all, you can go to manlikeradio.com, manlikeradio.com. If you're watching us on social media and you want to get your question in anonymously where nobody will know, go to manlikeradio.com, hit the red button, and you can use Slido, not to advertise them, they don't pay us for advertisement, but use them to get your question in. Number two, you can stay on social media and do it right there. We're monitoring right now. Our producer, show producer, is watching it, and we'll monitor it, and we'll put your question in. Also, along that one, also let you know that later on you can always pick up the Man Like, and you can do it in many ways. First of all, if you have an iPhone, you can say, hey, keyword, I won't say her name, but I'm talking about Siri, and say a Man Like Radio, just one word, Man Like Radio. And if you are subscribing to us, it will pop up on your actual phone, or now they have the other units and so forth, also on your laptop. And if you're using Google, same thing, you can go to Google, and it says okay. Of course, you can say it again. I don't want to let other people's phones go off. And you could say, Google, play Man Like Radio, and you'll do that. And there are other areas. Go to manlikeradio.com. I could keep going on and on with this because we've got it in many areas. You can go to manlikeradio.com if you want to see the different areas. You can listen to that. YouTube, Facebook, and I'm just saying that right now. Internet Archives, Buzzsprout. All on the Man Like Radio. Just go there and you'll be able to listen to and watch the broadcast. Also, one last thing before we get into it, Arthur, I want to remind everybody we are giving away this month. In fact, we have a few more days left to draw a free Amazon Echo Dot. That's right, the Alexa little dot unit. We're giving that away. And all you have to do is get your email in at manlikeradio@gmail.com. That's manlikeradio@gmail.com. Right there. Get that in, and we will put your name in the drawing in the next few days. Thank you for some of the men who've already done that. Arthur, tonight we're talking about a man and his toys. This is a good one. A man and his toys. Arthur, do you have toys?
Probably.
Go ahead. I mean, be honest.
Not as many as I used to have.
What's one of your favorite toys? Tools?
Tools are, I guess they can be classified as toys. We collect them, and I've got a bunch of those. But when I think about toys, I'm thinking about things that are just for your, for pleasure, for enjoyment. One thing I used to have more of than I have now, and that's guns. I like to collect guns. And the toy that I probably missed the most is when I had a motorcycle. But when you have kids, you got to take priorities, man.
Right. And I agree upon that. Well, my toys, as you know, is always gadgets. I just love gadgets. I've always liked those things that you can use for technology and so forth. And cars. The only problem, I can't afford the car one. But left to me, if I could, I'd have at least 3 or 4 cars in my garage or yard that I'd be really, have I had three, just got rid of one too long, and actually antique one, you know that one. And but you know, I'm kind of tempted to get another one in the future. But let's talk about that, Arthur. Let's talk about this as we talk about a man and his toys. Okay, first of all, right off the back, Arthur, is it wrong for a man? I'm talking about a Christian man to have these things in his life. Can it take away from God?
Anything can take away from God. And
Agreed.
that's the things that we have to watch. You know, the saying goes, God doesn't care if you have money or anything else. It's whether the money has you, and that's what we got to be careful about. There's certain things that men possess that it becomes more valuable to them than relationships and other things like that, and that's when it becomes detrimental.
Right, and that's what we want to avoid. Let's get that straight out the back. So you're saying, as we agree, it's not wrong, but you don't want to take away from those things which are more dear to you in your life, correct?
Yeah, I heard of an instance where a couple, you know, recently married couple, they had financial situations and a child on the way, and all these other things were happening, and they got to interviewing the couple, and the guy had a sports car that was worth about $40,000 that would have taken care of all their financial deal if he would just sold it, but he said he couldn't sell it.
Mm.
You know, and that's when something becomes it actually becomes a god in your life, and you worship it instead of just using it. What I'm finding is the older I get, the less toys I really, you know, it's like I heard one preacher say this. He said, everything we have, we either got to feed it, water it, or put oil in it, or some kind of maintenance.
Right. It has to be taken care of like a baby. Has to be taken care of like a baby. So there's a balance in this. So let's talk about the balance. So we're saying, we're agreeing, and we've found no place in the Bible where God says it's wrong, correct?
No, Solomon had great possessions. Abraham had great possessions. You know, lots of men in the Bible had great possessions. But it's when the possessions possess you that you have a problem. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And sometimes God, you know, he gives you things. Well, it says in Timothy that he gives us all things to enjoy. I was listening to a preacher the other day, and God asked him a question, and he said, do I supply all your needs? And he said, no. And he goes, yes, you supply all my needs. And he said, no, I don't. And he said, I knew that. He said he knew God had him then. He said, no, he said, I give you everything to enjoy, and in your enjoyment, it meets your needs. And that's a different spin on it than what we normally think of. Right. God's very generous and very apt to take care of us, but sometimes we get sidetracked with the possessions and whatever we have.
Correct.
That it's to our detriment.
Right. I understand that. So let's go to the next question here that we have here. And okay, so I know you touched on a little bit, but let's start with family. Where does family fit in? Then we're going to go after that to God. Where does family, you've touched lightly on that part. Where does family fit in when it comes to a man having his toys? And you said a while ago, a good example. And I'll just give you this. I remember listening to a pastor a number of years ago, before I even fully got into the ministry, who God had blessed him, and he used to collect classic cars. And he did this not with the church salary. He did it off of his own money. And one day, a lady in the church needed money, serious money. And it was something after a death of her husband. And he laid there and said, God supplies. And the Lord said, go down to your garage. And one of his sports Corvettes was in there. And he ended up selling it and giving her the money. She never knew. And he never told her. Everybody, he was not married, by the way. But he never told her. And no one knew except some of the elders of the church. So where does family fit in, Arthur?
Well, family takes priority. When a man commits to a woman and takes her as his wife, then everything else has to fall into place. But you know, in our society today, so many couples live they want to live single, but they want to live together, and that just doesn't work. I've seen ladies have we criticize men about the difference between men and boys or the price of their toys.
Right.
You've heard that saying, but I've seen ladies collect certain things, shoes or purses or and a woman look at a man, he wants to spend $600 on a handgun. She thinks that's ridiculous when she wants to spend $600 on a purse.
Right.
And to him, that's ridiculous. Well, it would be definitely ridiculous if both of them needed $600 to pay the rent. Yes. But they go buy a gun or go buy the purse, and that's what we have in society today. Mm-hmm. It's you have to take priority. You got to take care of your family. You got to take care of your kids. I used to ride a motorcycle years ago. You knew that. I used to come see you on the motorcycle.
Right.
Our car broke down, and my wife was out of car, and we had a child, and so I sold the bike. Actually, traded it in on a car, and that was that child was 2 when that happened, and he's now fixing to be 35.
Right. And
I haven't had one since. Yeah. But you just have to take priorities, and that was a priority in my life, but now it's not.
Right. So what we're saying is, a man of God, you can have these things especially if you can afford them, because I know some hobbies or some things, some toys are expensive. So you can have these things as long as you can afford them, but as long as when there's a need, especially if that need means even selling or getting rid of that thing, it should be done to bring sanity and a peace to the marriage. And we're dealing with men. We know that women have their things too, and we're not going to get there because it's a man-like, not a woman-like show. But as men, we understand that. So now let's talk about the God factor.
Well, I think a lot of times the very things that we like, there are other men that like them. I know of one minister that he likes to hunt. He's been given a number of guns, and people know that he hunts. And when they call him to a special event to speak, a lot of times they'll give him a gun as an appreciation gift. And he also speaks in the corporate world. That's where most of them come from, was the corporate world.
Right.
But he said he's been in and go in places and find someone that likes to hunt, and they because of where they're at in their lives, they may not be able to afford a certain gun, or he just wants to bless them. So he'll take something out of his collection and just bless them. So, if God can call on you, like you talking about that pastor, if it had the sports car, if he can call on you that you'll give what you have, then he has no problem with you having anything, because it's at his disposal whenever he needs it.
Right. And just want to put something on that, Arthur. Also, we want to remember, unfortunately, a few days ago, this terrible shooting that happened in Florida in the high school. We want to remember all those families and friends who were affected by it. And I just want to say this so people can understand. We're talking about men having their toys, and we're not. I just want to say before we go into this is not a gun control or non-gun control subject that we're talking. We're not tooting both ears. We're talking about men and their toys. Some men love guns, and I'm talking about godly, good men. Some men love cars. Some men love computers, and some like I know a good friend of mine, who God has blessed him with an airplane. And what I'm saying is, some men, men, we're dealing with toys. We're not dealing with a woman has purse. Author just bringing along the line. And the reason why I got an Author is because I know some of these questions will come, they start flipping on us,
Right.
But when they do start coming in after the break. But here's what I want to put out to you. So you're saying, and you said it right, when a man is ready and willing and able to give it up properly, then you know that he's not bound to it. So really, there's no problem in the toy as long as the toy doesn't have us.
Right. There's men that...
Right, go ahead.
Yeah, there's men that like to... their toy, if you will, what they really enjoy is buying property. You know, they have they'll buy ranches and stuff like that. They like cows. They like. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But you can get so focused on that it can take away from what you're take away from your family, or you put yourself in a financial situation to where you can lose it all. You know. So and I was thinking about. I know a couple that they both like jet skis. So they have jet skis, his and her jet skis.
Yeah.
So that's a toy,
and that's a good thing for a couple. Let me say it's to a married couple, Arthur, to go in together on that. You know, I know of another couple, like you said, both have bicycles. And when I go praying, where I live up here in the north, I should say way north of San Antonio, going near Austin, I go to the park and pray, as you know that my secret park. Mm-hmm. And when I'm out there praying, you see husband and wives coming together, both with their bicycles and dressed like twins and just really having a good time.
Yeah. Well, I've heard of a couple that has the tandem bike.
Right.
They own tandem bike tours, and you know that's a toy, but you know anything can be a toy, and it's just what brings you pleasure. I know men that and women, they both like to hunt, so they go hunting and they'll do they do their trophies and got animal heads hanging all over their houses and all that. I said, well.
And I know, and you know some who go and buy antiques together, and we could keep going on.
Oh yeah.
So but we're going to go for a break, and before we go to the break, I'm going to ask you the question, then come back and let you answer it at the end of the break, because we're going to remind some of the men that they are listening to, and thank you for joining in the Man Like Radio podcast. We're talking tonight, or today, I should say, on this program, we're talking about a man and his toy. Is it wrong? Does it take away a Christian man? Does it take away from God? So here's the question, Arthur, and then I'll come back and we will answer this at the other side, flip side of the break. And it said, what about men who serve God but are told you have to deny everything? Would that be considered denying everything? But before you answer that, Arthur, we're going to go to the break, and I'll be right back. I'm Richard Boyd. This is the Man Like Radio podcast with Arthur Culpepper from Three Rivers, Texas. We'll be right back in a moment. Thank you for joining into the program today. It's a pleasure to have you. But listen, we need subscribers. We need you to subscribe to us. Now, you can subscribe to us two ways. You can do so on the social media you're watching, or you can go to manlikeradio.com and join up to our email. That's right. Subscribe to us, guys, so that way we can keep in touch. We can send you news of what's going on. At the same time, we can get together, and when we have giveaways and so forth, you can be a part of that. So once again, thank you so much. But we do need subscribers, and we do need you to subscribe. So please take that time and go ahead and either hit the subscribe button, whatever social media you're on, or at the same time, go to manlikeradio.com and send us an email at manlikeradio@gmail.com. Well, let's go right back into the program. Well, we're back. That's right. And Arthur, at the break, I was going to ask the question, and I'll ask it now again. And I'll say to you is this: we're talking about a man and his toys. And those who are joining in, now if you're listening later, you can listen to the whole podcast. Or if you listen to a condensed version, you can go back to manlikeradio.com and get the entire podcast. But I just want to say, Arthur, what about men who are told to deny everything for God? How do we address that issue? Well, that means that if I don't deny my hobbies or things like that, and I know you've already dealt with the question about, we've dealt with it. It's not wrong to have those things that we feel as a good, recreation and a blessing to us, and we can enjoy together. But what about that? What would you say to that one?
I don't understand why certain people in Christianity think you have to take a vow of poverty, that you have to give up everything.
Right.
When I talk about giving up everything, I'm talking about giving up sin, giving up what dominates us. I don't consider poverty as being a blessing, because I've traveled in other parts of the world, and you have too. Adverse poverty is not godly. That people that live in adverse poverty, I don't know anybody that lives in adverse poverty that's godly. They're lying, stealing, and cheating, trying to get ahead. The scripture says in Proverbs, the blessing of the Lord maketh rich and addeth no sorrow with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes we try to appease God by the flesh by taking vows of poverty and saying we're going to give up everything. But are you really giving it up if you're longing in your heart for it?
Mm-hmm.
This is a heart issue. It's not something that and for us to judge one another and say, well, he shouldn't have that kind of car, or he shouldn't have that kind of house. He shouldn't live there. I've heard that from religious people all of my life, and it makes me. In fact, now it just almost makes me angry, because who are we? The scripture says, "Who are we to judge another man's servant?"
Right.
I remember a conversation when I was very young, looking at going into the ministry, and it really bothered me that I had family members talking around, and this was years ago, like 50 years ago, almost. Well, about 50 years ago. They were saying that this guy there was a prominent preacher was making right around $100,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, back then that was a lot of money. Still is today, but not like it was then. But come to find out, he had like 10 millionaires in his church. So, a guy making $100,000 a year and a guy bringing in millions a year, that's no comparison. So why are we judging what they're paying him and trying to put a dollar amount on what a preacher should make? And I know this is kind of getting off the subject, but it's not really, because if we're managing our lives by being led by the Spirit, then if God asks for us to lay something down or to give something up, he told Peter, I'll make you fishers of men, and Peter forsook his business.
Right.
Left his business. But then later, Peter asked him in Mark's gospel, I think it's the 10th chapter, asked Jesus, he said, we've left everything. He said, nobody's left anything for the kingdom that won't receive in this lifetime. The scripture says, in this lifetime, 100-fold with persecution.
Yes.
So whatever you give up, he's going to give you 100 times as much, but you're going to be persecuted for it.
Right.
But he said the first to be last and the last to be first.
Right.
So, so I don't know why we have to have this concept that preachers or those that serve God have to be broke and all of this, because to me that's not very attractive.
Well, of course, the answer to that, to a lot of people are going to say Jesus had nothing. But my wife and I were talking about this the other day, and I know we don't want to go off and that's another man-like program for itself. Probably have a call in with you and all of the hosts. Maybe get you and Stan and Jeff Daniels to really deal with this. But another thing that as you know, Arthur, is that Jesus had nothing. But I noticed with Jesus that he never rejected the rich either. The only one person who walked away was wealthy, was a rich young ruler, because he would not give it up and follow Christ. But he didn't tell Zacchaeus, I don't want to come to your house. He said, I'm going to come to your house. And through that, salvation came. And he went to Simon's house. And we could keep going on the places that he was. And he didn't feel shame even going. The Jews wouldn't go into a palace, but he went there, even though he was forced in there. So I agree with you on that, Arthur, that needs to be settled right there, that we think that there must be some form of forced, kind of like a religious thing, to make people know that you're suffering, or that you must prove yourself by suffering, although we know that God has asked us to give up, if not everything, for him, in which in many ways some of us have done that already. You agree upon that, right?
Well, when we gave our, when I submitted to the call of God, it's whatever God wanted. I was his, not just part-time, all the time. Everything that I have is his. And in actuality, everything that we possessed as a born-again believer, belongs to God anyway.
Right. Correct.
Because we are his bondservant, and whatever the servant has belongs to the master.
Yes. Yes.
And if the master asks me for it, it's his. I mean, Abraham sought him with his whole heart for a son. And he got the son, and then God asked him for his son. He said, and he was willing to give his son. Why? Because he knew something about God, that whatever God asks you for, it is something that he wants to bless you.
Right.
He wants to bless you in that area. It's not that to make you suffer. You know, I heard a spin on Christian suffering. He said the other day, and the suffering was, we suffer when we try to, our suffering comes from persecution and being misunderstood when we try to enforce what Jesus bought for us on the cross. Our healing, our provision, our everything. When we start preaching that, is when we start getting persecuted.
Right. So Arthur, let's deal with this right now, because a question came in. I want to remind you, if you're joining in, you can, those of you who are actually joining live, you can get your question in. And even if you're not on live, you can still get your question in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, by going to manlightradio.com, and you will see the red button there if you want to stay anonymous, or if you are listening, or if you're joining us on social media, you can go ahead and put your question in there. Now, this question might be a little bit off topic, Arthur, but I think it came in before the program, so I do want to answer it and still keep the line of what we're talking about. And basically, this man is saying that his family and a pastor, I guess his pastor, are saying he must get married because it's not right, because now he's 47 years old, but he feels he should stay single. You want to address that for a few minutes, and then we'll go back to what we're talking about? Maybe this is his hobby.
Well, the scripture says that some men are eunuchs from birth, and some men make themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of God. Paul, some believe that Paul was single. If a man wants to stay single, who am I to tell him to marry?
Right.
Now, if he has a problem with lust and self-control, that's what Paul said in Corinthians. He said, if you struggle with self-control, marry. Don't burn. Don't burn with passion, but marry. But he said, if you can control yourself, it's better to stay single. You can be totally focused on God. You don't have to be sidetracked. And I don't mean it in a detrimental way, but sidetracked with a family, with children, and with a wife. All of those things play into the kingdom of God. But when it's just you and God, then you're free to make any decision you want. And for people to self-impose, I don't know what it is about our society, but we think once a person gets past 30, they should already be married. I have a good friend that was 60 before he ever married. and he's happy, he's happy that he's married. But he was a bachelor for 60-something years, and I'm thinking, oh my Lord, if a woman marries him, and she did, and they're as happy as they can be.
Wow.
And so I just look at me and say, oh man, if I had been a bachelor for 60 years and then get married.
Right. Well, let's go back into this question we're talking about. We want to answer that question. We got a few minutes left. Let's go back in this. I want to give a shout out to everyone right now who is listening live. Thank you, those who are joining us on social media. I want to say a shout out to all of you. I'm not going to even call the name this a lot, but I do. That doesn't mean that you're not important. I know other people do. They call each name and say, hey, I could say, hey, thank you, so on and so forth. But I just want to say thank you for being a part of this podcast and this live broadcast. Those who are actually listening live, and those who come in later and listen to the pre-recorded or the after, say thank you once again for being a part of that, and thank you for your support. Now let's talk about this, Arthur. And I'm looking at another question here, and that I had written down earlier before the show, and I want to get this out to you. How can a hobby be a blessing for God? Because I believe it can be. And you said earlier, we spoke about some examples about even people we knew who basically sold what they had to help somebody else. And so how can it become a blessing of God?
Well, I know a couple of facts. I got a couple in my church that he's into cars, and they go to car shows. They don't have a car right now. They sold their last one, but they're looking for one. And so they go to car shows. Well, the whole time they're witnessing for Jesus the whole time, and they're known in the car circuit for being the preachers in the bunch. And there's some other preachers that they've met other ministers that's their hobby. They like old cars, and they go to car shows, and they share the gospel with people and pray for people. And there's people have all kinds of different hobbies and collections, and we're called to be salt and light wherever we go. And I think we especially in America, we tend to compartmentalize our life, that this is our secular life and this is our religious life. No, we just have one life, and we got to be preaching Jesus in everything we do. And
God expects that reaction and that type of lifestyle in everything we do, whether we go to car shows, games, go out there and ski. He expects us to still be that person that he desires us to be. We don't just turn it off and say, okay, now I'm riding my bike. This is my hobby. No, we should be a Christian, especially men, talking to Christian men all the way through.
Well, I know you and your techie stuff. You've had a tremendous influence on other people in the tech world just by preaching the gospel on doing band like and stuff like that have touched people that have nothing to do with the church, but they see what you're doing and they say, hey man, we have people listening that don't darken the door of the church, but they want to hear what you have to say because you're involved in what they're involved in.
Right. And I you know what, Arthur, I know I've had one already. In fact, it's been a couple of years, when we used to do the Good News show with my granddaughter Alex and all. You know about that. You're on that too.
Right.
Before we really started to focus on man life. And this man, his whole tech broadcast, but he's a godly Christian man. And he has been to conventions and meetings, and he's won people for the Lord. And you know what? Even myself, I was trying a few weeks ago to go to the International Podcasters thing that we're kind of connected to, and I couldn't get there. It's been the second year. And I said, you know what? Next year I'm going to make an effort, because you can still get out there and win souls. And this came, I want to say this, Arthur, you're right. This came from both of us just doing it as a hobby. Me doing the tech, you coming on, just doing it as a hobby, just to kind of say, hey, what's out there in technology? Our phones. I mean, you've used your phone to broadcast around the world.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't into any kind of techie stuff until we started doing this. And I saw, man, let's get on the internet and preach the gospel. So this is where, I think we ought to take everything and preach the gospel, man. Yes. Use your hobby to preach the gospel.
Yes.
If you like archery, go to the archery shop and talk about Jesus, man.
Right. Right. And like you said, you don't want this ever. We already established in the beginning. You don't want this, if it's taken away from you and if you're married, your family, or even your family and God. First of all, God and family, then you know this is no longer a hobby. This is now can be an idolatry.
Right.
And that includes even a job, Arthur. I know people say, oh, don't say that. But if that job is taken away, Mr. Man, that job is taken away from your kids, taken away from your family, your wife, Mr. Man, I'm talking to you. Arthur, now talking to you, even though I'm talking. If it's taken away from God, your time with God, if it takes away your prayer time, okay? You know, it was funny, not to mention that, Arthur, I was walking one day through the park praying, and these cyclists were getting together, and one young guy, really young guy, looked at the older guy and said, you know what, I can't make it on Thursdays. He said, why? He said, because Thursdays, he said, that's the time I go with my son, and we go out and we have breakfast, and I don't know how old his son, he said, then I read him the Bible. And I almost stopped and said, wow, and the guy said, are you serious? He said, yeah, I'm serious. So yes, you don't want ever to take away from the things of God, correct?
Right. Since you hit this subject, I think a lot of guys choose jobs just strictly based on finances. And that's not the way you choose a job. You choose a job is your job is your ministry. And if that's what God's called you to do, then he's going to provide the finances wherever it's at. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we need to look at that as what's your, going back to what we used to talk about, what's your assignment? Find out what your assignment is, and then let everything flow out of that assignment.
Right.
Right. Jesus changed Peter's assignment, said, I'm going to make you fishers of men. And when he had taxes to pay, he didn't say, you go down to Jerusalem and get a job. We're going to keep working in ministry. And when you get the taxes paid, come catch up with us. And that's the way we view ministry sometimes. But Jesus said, no, on assignment, he went and gave him, Peter was a fisherman, but he fished with a net commercially. But apparently he liked fishing because he had a pole and a line. And he went, he not only fished commercially, he must have fished recreationally, yes. And recreationally paid his taxes. Wow. So, our job should be our assignment, and don't just take a job for money, because that's the worst thing you can do. Mm-hmm. I've seen it bust up homes. I've seen people move out of churches and all of this just because they go get a job and then they're miserable because they're not where God wants them to be. Right. Well, guess what? We've come into the time again. Yes, about that time to make this thing history. Yeah, I know. And so any closing words to guys who want to collect jewelry and want to go out with their wives or their friends to have a good time once in a while? Any closing words to that, Arthur? God's given us everything to enjoy, and just realize that that's in Timothy, and he's talking about the rich right there. He said that don't trust, and that's the big key, don't trust in uncertain riches, but in God who gives you all things to enjoy. Mm-hmm. Because as we all know, the stock market goes up and down, and money comes, money goes, but God will always be there. Right, correct, awesome. Good way to close it today. I want to thank you, all the men out there who have listened, and all of you, yes, ladies who came into and listened, those of you who've seen here on social media, thank you once again who've joined in, those who are listening later on down. We don't want to ever forget our post listeners, I should say, if I got it right, our post listeners, because you're just as important too. And remember, you can listen to this podcast in many ways by going to manlightradio.com. On top, you'll see all the places you can go to listen. Also, if you have your iPhone, you can tell Siri that you want to hear Manlight Radio. If you have your Android phone, you can tell Google you want to listen to Android. You want to listen to Manlight Radio, and you can join us on different ears by going to manlightradio.com. You'll see all the places over there. Thank you once again for being a part of this. Talked about tonight, a man and his toy. Hey guys, enjoy your toy, but don't ever, like Arthur has said and I've said, ever let this take away from God. Right, Arthur? You agree upon that? Amen. Don't let it take away. Well, anyways, and by the way, somebody wrote in, I want to get this here, and they said, thanks for the wisdom. And you know what? I had to look over there because I think it's some good friends of mine. And I just want to say, shout out to all of y'all there. Thank you for being a part of this program. And we love you on behalf of all of us out here. We love you. Right, Arthur? And we'll talk to you next time. Amen. God bless. Thank you once again for joining us on this Man Life podcast. Please take time and email us at manlikeradio@gmail.com. Once again, that's manlikeradio@gmail.com. Manlike Podcast is a production of R.N. Boyd Productions and Love Gospel Network. Please seek a qualified professional in the area you need immediate help.